بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن والاه. Then ليلة الثلاثاء التاسع وعشرين من المحرم لعام 35 و400 وألف من الهجرة. Tonight, the night preceding Wednesday, the 29th night of Muharram in the year 1435, we're going to continue with our lessons, it being the third lesson of Daleel at-Taalib, the third lesson of Daleel at-Taalib with the explanation of Muhammad ibn Ahmad BaaJaabir. And tonight's lesson will be the first actual lesson in the book. Everything else that we took so far had to do with the introduction of the explainer to this book. And to recap what we talked about in last class, we talked about the etiquette or the methodology in studying fiqh and how important it is to study it one step at a time. And that for this reason, the student, when he studies fiqh, he should start off with just the issues, learning and familiarizing himself with just the issues of Islamic law, without the evidence, without the ikhtilaf, without the tarjihat, but instead just familiarize himself with the issues. And this is so that he might be aware of the things that are out there. Then after learning the issues in totality, after that he goes on to learn the issues with their evidence. So he starts with just the issues, and then after finishing that, he goes to the issues and their evidence. Then, after learning the issues with their evidence, he ascends to the next level, which is the issues and the disagreement therein. I.e., the issues along with their evidences, and now also with the disagreement about these issues. So he takes it step by step, learning the issue, then the evidence of the issue, and then the disagreement about the issue, along with the tarjihat, or the reasonings why certain opinions have been given more support compared to others. And so we are going to start at what would be considered to be the second level, which is learning the issues with the evidence. And this is due to our, oldness in age and our need and my desire to always be with evidence. So we talked about that methodology, and we talked about how in this book, the explainer is going to, in effect al-ibara, he's going to clarify the statements of this book. And he's going to mention at-Daleel and the Ta'leel, and or the Ta'leel. At-Daleel wa at-Ta'leel. Only. And we talked about the Daleel and the Ta'leel, what was meant with this statement. So we said that the evidence, the type of proof that's used for an issue, and when we say issue in Islamic law, first of all, do you all understand when we say an issue? Who can give me an example of an issue in Islamic law? What's an issue? Fadl. Give me an example. Fadl. Water being heated by, this is an issue. Wudu, salat, wearing this type of, anything that is a topic that we need a ruling from Allah and His Messenger in is an issue, right? So now, that means everything, right? Because everything is an issue. So the proof that is used to support the correctness of an issue are two types. We mentioned the Daleel and the Ta'leel. What is meant by those two phrases? Right? Ta'leel bil-ayn. Right, reasoning and insight. So Daleel, when the author is saying he's going to mention an issue, right? Water. How many types of water? Water is, in the book they're going to say 3 types, right? Now we need a proof for that. The proof is going to be either Daleel, which is the statement of Allah, the statement of Allah's Messenger, the consensus of the Muslims. These are Daleel. These are things that are evidences in and of themselves. And then after that, you have what is known as Ta'leel, or justification, reasoning, insight. We looked at this issue, and this issue seems to be like this issue, or it suits well with this issue. This is known as Daleel and Ta'leel. So the explainer, in this book, he's going to clarify the author's expressions. Daleel at-Taalib was authored by Mar'i ibn Yusuf. Shaykh BaaJaabir, he's going to clarify Mar'i's statements. And he's going to mention the Daleel or the Ta'leel that is used to support that statement, regardless of its validity. Is it the correct opinion or the incorrect opinion? Why is he doing it that way? Because the goal of this class is simply to understand that book. We're not here to get into the debate about what's right and what's wrong. We're learning this book, and he's going to talk about it today. But the point is that, so that's how he's going to explain this book to us. And he also mentioned in conclusion of what we talked about last week, some of the secondary sciences or the supplementary sciences. So we talked about that Islam has fundamental sciences in ulum al-asl wa ulum al-al, right? Fundamental knowledge and then supplementary knowledge that is used to help you understand that fundamental knowledge. So who is aware of that fundamental knowledge in Islam, that foundation? What are there? There are 4. I added the 4th one. There's 3 that he mentioned, but I added the 4th one. Right, which is called Aqidah. This is the one I added from other places. And then there's 3 more sciences that are fundamental in Islam. Sciences that are of the utmost importance. Like they're the basis of everything we do. Tafsir. We got Aqidah, Tafsir, Fiqh, and what else? You're missing Hadith. Mumtaz. Quran, right? Tafsir, Hadith, Fiqh, and Aqeedah. And it all goes back down to Quran and Hadith, because Fiqh and Aqeedah are derived from Quran and Hadith. But these are what are known as the fundamental knowledges. Then there are knowledges that are used to support us in understanding that. For example, Arabic language, right? In Arabic language, from another class we got, there are 3 major aspects of it: grammar, nahu, sarf, morphology, and balagha, or the etiquette of speaking well and conveying a point. And then from outside of the Arabic language, there are other sciences like usul al-tafsir, how to do tafsir; usul al-fiqh, how to understand fiqh; in mustalah al-hadith, how to understand hadith in the terminology of the people of hadith. These 6 sciences, along with those 4 fundamental sciences, are how you should start off as a student. And as you look at our lessons, we find them centering around these things. So we have tafsir, we have hadith, we have fiqh, right? We have aqidah, and durus al-muhimma. This is going to be like our aqidah version. And likewise, we have the Arabic classes in the Masjid. Eventually we'll get into nahu. We have usul al-fiqh coming after we finish our level 1. We have mustalah al-hadith already, right? Usul al-tafsir after we finish level 1. All of these things are how we're trying to base ourselves. So it's important for you to familiarize yourself with these knowledges, because these are the fundamentals. And he gave the example of the statement, al-zad wal-bulugh kafiyani fi an-nubuwwah. Zad al-mustaqni in fiqh and bulugh al-maram in hadith are sufficient in in starting your education. Meaning these 2 sciences together, fiqh and hadith together, are sufficient in starting your education. So this is some of the things that we started with last class, and today will be our first lesson from the actual book itself. So we'll begin.
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على خير خلق الله محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. اللهم اغفر لنا ولشيخنا وللحاضرين قال المؤلف رحمه الله وأسكنه فسيح جنانه. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له مالك يوم الدين، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله المبين لأحكام شرائع الدين الفائز بمنتهى الإرادات من ربه، فمن تمسك بشريعته فهو من الفائزين. صلى الله عليه وعلى جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آل كل وصحبه أجمعين. وبعد، فهذا مختصر في الفقه على المذهب الأحمد مذهب الإمام أحمد، بالغت في إيضاحه رجاء الغفران، وبينت فيه الأحكام أحسن بيان. لم أذكر فيه إلا ما جزم بصحته أهل التصحيح والعرفان، وعليه الفتوى فيما بين أهل الترجيح والإتقان. وسميته بدليل الطالب لنيل المطالب. والله أسأل أن ينفع به من اشتغل به من المسلمين، وأن يرحمني والمسلمين إنه أرحم الراحمين.
So this is the author's introduction to the book. The reader just read it. So he said, after mentioning the praise of Allah and making dua, Al-Imam Mar'i ibn Yusuf al-Karmi, he said, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and in him I rely. All praise is to Allah. All praise belongs to Allah, Lord of all that exists. And I testify that there is no deity worthy of worship other than Allah alone, without any partner to him, the owner of the day of judgment. And I testify that Muhammad is his servant and his messenger, the one who clarified the rulings of the religion, the one who succeeded in obtaining all of those goals set for him by his Lord. So whoever holds fast to his legislation, then he will also be from those who are successful. May the salat and the salam of Allah be upon him, as well as all of the prophets and messengers, and upon all of their families and his companions altogether. After that, then this is a summarization in fiqh based upon the best school of thought, or the most praiseworthy school of thought, the school of thought of Imam Ahmad. I've gone to great lengths in clarifying it, hoping for forgiveness. And I have clarified in it the rulings with a great clarification. And I have only mentioned in it that which has been deemed to be sound by the people of reliability and awareness. Those statements upon which the verdicts are given by those who deem what is correct and have proficiency. And I have named this book Daleel at-Taalib li nail al-Matalib, evidence for the student in accomplishing the goals. And I ask Allah that He benefit with it all of those who busy themselves with it, and may He have mercy upon me and the Muslims. Verily He is the most merciful of those who show mercy. This is the introduction of the author, and inshallah soon we'll put up some of the translation. This is my statement to you all, of course. We'll put up the translation of the English so you can keep up with it. We started the translation of it. May Allah reward those who busy themselves with that. And now the Shaykh will go on to explain this introduction.
بدأ المصنف عليه رحمة الله بالحمد لله تعالى، فقال الحمد لله رب العالمين. والحمد هو وصف الله أو الثناء على الله سبحانه وتعالى بالجميل، وعقب ذلك بالشهادتين، وأشار في قوله أو في عبارته وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله المبين لأحكام شرائع الدين، ثم قال
What's that? The Shaykh Hafidhullah, he says, so the author, Rahimahullah, he started off his book with Alhamd. He started off his book with the statement, Alhamdulillah, Lord of all that exists. And Alhamd is that you mention Allah, or describe Allah or praise Allah with the beautifulness that He is entitled to. Right? Wasf Allah or thana Allah bil jameel. That you praise Allah with the beautiful qualities that He has. And then he followed that up with the statement, and I testify that there is no deity worthy of worship other than Allah. And basically he followed it up, as the author said, with the shahadatain. The testimony that there's no deity worthy of worship other than Allah, and the testimony that Muhammad is His servant and His messenger.
بمنتهى الإرادات من ربه. الفائز بمنتهى الإرادات من ربه أي منتهى ما يريده الإنسان من ربه.
Now, he says, and then in his statement, after saying, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu, I testify that Muhammad is His servant and His messenger, the one who clarified the legislation of this religion. Al-Faiz bimuntaha al-iradati min Rabbi, the one who accomplished or was successful in getting everything that he wanted from his Lord. Yani al-muntaha al-iradat, the end of all of his goals that he wanted from his Lord. Everything that he wanted from his Lord, he was able to get.
قوله منتهى الإرادات إشارة إلى كتاب ابن النجار منتهى الإرادات. ولذلك كثير من أهل العلم قالوا إن مرعي الكرمي اختصر هذا الكتاب من كتاب منتهى الإرادات لابن النجار.
Now, and then he says, and as far as in his statement, Muntaha al-Iradat, right? He has like here a play on words that he's doing. Because there's a book entitled Muntaha al-Iradat, authored by Ibn Najjar, who was another scholar of the Hanbali school of thought. And for this reason, a lot of scholars say that Mar'i ibn Yusuf, he summarized that book in this book, Daleel at-Taalib. He took Muntaha al-Iradat and made it a summary in this book. And so like in his statement, the one who was able to accomplish all of the goals from his Lord is like a play on words to make praise to the Prophet, or to like speak highly of the Prophet, and to show that he used this other book as a foundation. So that's something they draw attention to in his introduction.
الإرادات هو عمدة الحنابلة المتأخرين، هو وكتاب الإقناع للحجاوي.
And he says in these books, meaning Muntaha al-Iradat by Ibn Najjar, and likewise a book entitled Al-Iqna' by Al-Hajawi, these two books are the foundation of the Hanbali school of thought amongst the later generation of its students. These two books, Muntaha al-Iradat wal-Iqna', are the foundation of Hanbali law.
أشار إلى أنه مختصر منه بهذه العبارة.
So the author is showing us that he kind of summarized that book by using this phrase.
ثم صلى على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى الآل وعلى الصحب وعلى آل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى صحابة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثم شرع في بيان موضوع هذا الكتاب فقال.
He says, and then after mentioning that, the author, rahimahullah, went on to send salat and salam upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Likewise upon all of the prophets as well, and the family and companions of our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So he sent salat and salam upon the Prophet, as well as the rest of the prophets, and as well as the family and companions of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then after that, he began to talk about the goal or the purpose of this book. So he said,
مختصر والمختصر هو ما قل لفظه وكثر معناه.
He said that the author said in his introduction that this is a mukhtasar. This is a summarization in fiqh. And a summarization in Arabic, right, the word mukhtasar, it means it has few words but a big meaning. Its wordage is small, but its meaning is extensive. This is what a summarization is.
هذا المختصر موضوعه في الفقه. قال هو في الفقه، والفقه معرفة الأحكام الشرعية العملية وليست الأحكام الشرعية الاعتقادية، فذاك ليس بفقه في الاصطلاح. ثم بين أن
Now, he says in that this summarization is in what topic? This summarization, as the author said, is in the topic of fiqh. And here's where you'll need your pens. He gives us here the definition of what is fiqh. What is fiqh? He says fiqh is an awareness about the rulings as they relate, the rulings of the legislated rulings of our actions. An awareness about the rulings that pertain to our actions. This is what is fiqh. To have awareness about the rulings as they pertain to our actions. I'm going to say to you, for me, for example, praying, what's the ruling regarding praying? What's the ruling? You have to, right? This is a ruling pertaining to our action. What's the ruling pertaining to marriage? You should get married. It's preferred, right? This is a ruling pertaining to our action. So this is what is fiqh. An awareness of the rulings that relate to our actions. Knowing the ruling or the religious ruling as it relates to our actions. And the author, rahimahullah, going back to the statement of BaaJaabir, he says, Hafidhullah, he says that this is fiqh. An awareness of the legislated rulings of our actions. And it is not an awareness of the rulings as they relate to our belief. Right? Because this is aqeedah. The rulings as they relate to our belief is aqeedah. This is not fiqh in this sense. Right? Fiqh is an awareness about the rulings as they relate to our actions. As far as the knowledge of the rulings as they relate to our belief, then this is aqeedah. Right? What do we believe about Allah? What do we believe about the angels? This is not in this definition of fiqh. So these are two definitions that he gave us. An awareness of the rulings that relate to our actions, right? And then they add with their evidence or their specific evidence. This is fiqh. And an awareness of what or knowledge about the things that we believe, then this is aqeedah.
المختصر الفقهي هو في مذهب الإمام أحمد. قال على المذهب الأحمد مذهب الإمام أحمد.
And he says, in this summarization in the affair of fiqh is going to be based on the school of thought of Imam Ahmad. So for that reason the author, he said, ala madhhabi al-Imam Ahmad. This views and opinions that we're going to learn are those that were held in the school of thought of the Hanabila.
الإمام أحمد أي أنه دون الأحكام الفقهية التي وردت عن الإمام أحمد نصا أو وردت عن الإمام أحمد إشارة وإيماء أو هي منسوبة للإمام أحمد من علماء المذهب من طلاب الإمام أحمد ومن أصحاب الإمام أحمد بناء على قواعده وأصوله.
And so what he's saying is that, so this book is going to comprise the issues that were ruled on by Imam Ahmad. And here he mentions some terminologies that we skipped in our introduction, because as we said, this was a lesson that he gave in conjunction with other lessons. But he mentions some terms that I feel that we need to mention now. And these are the terms that relate to the school of thought. So for example, in the school of thought of Imam Ahmad, there are issues, and these issues have opinions that they say about them, right? Water is 3 types. It's, wajib to get married or something like this, right? The way that they arrive at these things, one, they will either be a nas. They will be the statement of Imam Ahmad directly. That's what we mean when we say nas, right? Nas, noon, sad, right? We don't mean nas, i.e. from the book and the sunnah. We mean the statement of Imam Ahmad. In the school of thought, when they say nas, they mean the statement of Imam Ahmad. Generally, when they say the word nas, they mean the kitab and the sunnah, right? There's a nas in that issue. But here in the school of thought, what they mean is the statement of Imam Ahmad. Another way that they arrive at opinions in the school of thought is al-ishara wal-ima. Right? Imam Ahmed didn't say it directly, but he said something that made you understand that that was his opinion. For example, you ask, is it obligatory to get married? And he mentions a hadith in that issue. He didn't say yes, but the hadith kind of shows what his opinion was. This is what is known as ishara. He pointed towards it without saying it directly. Right? Ishara. Hamza, Sheen, Alif, Ra, Tarmabut. Ishara. Right? To point. He didn't say it directly. It wasn't a nas, but he gave you the understanding that that was his opinion. This is another way that they arrive at an opinion in a school of thought. Another thing they arrive at is what is known as a wajh, or a view. And a wajh is the opinion of the scholars of that school of thought. Right? Based on the fundamentals that their particular imam used. So for example, let's say Hassan is the leader of the school of thought, right? We ask him about the usage of computers. He says computers are permissible. This is a nas. He said it directly, right? Then we ask him about the usage of iPhones. He says, Allah says in the Quran, هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ لَكُم مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا. Allah is the one who's created for you everything on earth. Did he say, yes, it's okay to use iPhones? He didn't say it directly, but he brought an ayah that showed his opinion. This is what is known as ishara, to say it in an indirect fashion. Then you have a wajh. A wajh is an opinion held by the scholars of that school of thought. So Ilyas and Haris are scholars of the Hassan school of thought. I'm giving this as an example, right? So we asked them, well, what about using a tablet? Right? We know about computers and we know about iPhones, but nobody talked about a tablet. So Haris, he says it's okay to use a tablet, right? This is now called a what? A wajh. Because Hassan didn't say it, nor is there anything directly from Hassan, but the scholars of that school of thought held that opinion. Then they have other things like when they say a statement. There's a statement in the school of thought, a code. And that can be from any of these three things. It can be a nas or an ishara or a wajh. Right? Then they have other things called a possibility, ihtimal, where nobody said it, but it makes sense. Right? We ask Haris about the use of, or we ask about the use of, the new BlackBerry that's out. Nobody talked about it, but based on everything else that we have in the school of thought, it makes sense that it's okay to use it. This is what is known as a possibility. Anyway, these terms, we'll go over them more as he uses them in the book, because all of these have to do with what? The Daleel that they're going to use to prove an issue. Right? The statement of Imam Ahmed, the statement of his students, the statement that is based on their statements. And this is how a school of thought is founded. What's important, and I'm saying this to you to give you some background, is that a school of thought is not always the opinion of the one that it's attached to. So don't be surprised when there's an issue that's in this school of thought that goes against what Imam Ahmed said, or something that didn't ever exist during the time of Imam Ahmed. Right? Because it's something that comes from the aspect known as a wajh, or a view that was held by the scholars of that school of thought. So basically, going back to the statement of the author, he's saying that this book is going to contain these statements, or isharat, or indirect statements of Imam Ahmed, or the statements of his students, and so forth. That's what this book is going to contain. That's what he means when he says it's authored on the Hanbali school of thought. Meaning it's going to contain those views and opinions that are derived according to this method.
نصب إلى الإمام أحمد هو نوعان أو ثلاثة أنواع. إما مذهبه قوله صريحا أفتى به صراحة، أو أفتى به إيماء وإشارة فهم منه هذا، كأن يشير بيده، يسأل عن مسألة فيقال لا حرج في ذلك فيشير، يفهم منه أنه يعني أجاز ذلك. أو يكون لم ينسب للإمام أحمد، لم يتكلم به الإمام أحمد، لكن خرجه أصحابه على أصوله وقواعده.
No. So the Shaykh here, he actually does go into speaking about those things again, even though he spoke about them in the beginning of the previous lessons. So he says, so when he says that this will be based on the school of thought of Imam Ahmed, this is because the opinions in this school of thought are two, or better yet, three types. They will either be the direct statement of Imam Ahmed, which is called a what? Nas. Mumtaz. It's called a Nas. Or they will be something that Imam Ahmed pointed to indirectly, which is called a Ishara. Right? Like if somebody asked him a question and he said, no problem with it, I hope it's okay. He didn't give it a direct answer, but he gave an answer in a way that shows you what his position was. Or it will be that which the scholars of that school of thought arose at based on using the fundamentals that Imam Ahmed used. And this is called a wajh, right? A view that they have. And we're not going to get into talking about the fundamentals of this school of thought, what they use. We talked about them in other classes, the Quran, the Hadith, the statements of the Sahaba, right? Ijtihad, Qiyas, weak Hadith, all of these things are what is known as the fundamentals that they use to arrive at their principles. But so the author, the explainer BaaJaabir, he goes over, and he went over for us again, those three things. An-Nas, wal-Ishara, wal-Wajh.
Imam Ahmed. المقصود بأصحاب الإمام أحمد علماء المذهب المجتهدين.
And when he says the scholars, right, because the word they use for the scholars of any particular school of thought, they use the word ashab, right, the companions of that school of thought. And what is meant by the word ashab in this context, it means the scholars of that school of thought who had the ability to form their own opinion. Al-ulama al-mujtahideen. The scholars of that school of thought who had arose at a level of being able to form their own opinion. This is what is known as the ashab of any particular school of thought. The scholars of that school of thought who are able to form their own opinion.
سواء من طلابه من طبقة تلاميذه أو من طبقات بعد ذلك.
And he says, so therefore, it doesn't matter if they were from his students or his students' students or any generation after that. Right? If they are what? If they're scholars who have the ability to form their own opinion. Ulama, mujtahideen, in that particular school of thought, they're considered to be the scholars of that school of thought or the ashab of that school of thought.
قال على المذهب الأحمد مذهب الإمام أحمد ثم قال أشار إلى أنه بالغ في إيضاحه وأنه بينه أحسن بيان وأشار إلى قضية منهجية فقال لم أذكر فيه إلا ما جزم بصحته أهل التصحيح والعرفان.
No. So he says, so this is what is being meant when he says that this book is offered on the best of school of thoughts, the school of thought of Imam Ahmed. Right? And then he goes on to say after that I clarified in this book, or I went to great pains to clarify this book, to make it clear, to make the school of thought of Imam Ahmed clear, and I've clarified it with the best of clarifications. And then he talks about his mannerism or the methodology that he's going to use in the book. So how is Mar'i ibn Yusuf going to teach us in this book? What is the methodology that he's going to use? Right? So he says, I've only mentioned in this book that which has been deemed correct by the people of, soundness and awareness. Meaning the opinions that he's going to give us in this book are the strongest opinions in the school of thought. I'm saying to you, it doesn't mean that they're the strongest opinions. It just means that they're the strongest opinions in this school of thought. Right? So this school of thought might have other opinions, and other schools of thought might have other opinions, and these other opinions could possibly be correct. But what is Mar'i ibn Yusuf doing in this book? He's only going to mention to us the strongest and most correct opinion based on this school of thought. And there's a science to all of this, how they arrive at what's the most correct opinion that he might get into in these classes. So he's only going to mention in this book what? The correct opinion based on this school of thought. The strong opinion based on this school of thought.
هذا أن الإمام مرعي الكرمي اقتصر في هذا المختصر على ما رجحه مجتهدو المذهب نسبة إلى مذهب أحمد.
No. So he's saying, so this means that Mar'i ibn Yusuf summarized in this summarization that which was deemed to be correct by the scholars of this school of thought only. Right? This is why it's a summarization in this school of thought.
عندهم وما صح عندهم أنه منسوب إلى مذهبه إما صراحة وإما إيماء وإما تخريجا على قواعده وأصوله.
No. So the things that he's going to mention are those things that are deemed correct in this school of thought, whether they be from the direct statements or the indirect statements or the views held by those who came after Imam Ahmad.
هذه المسألة أيها الأحباب لا بأس أن نشير إليها إشارة، وهي مسألة ما رجحه الإمام أحمد أو ما ذهب إليه الإمام أحمد ونسب إليه.
No. He says, here my brothers, we want to mention, and there's no problem in mentioning it quickly, that which connects to what is deemed to be correct in this school of thought. And what is deemed to be the strong opinion in this school of thought. He's going to tell us a little bit about that. And I want to give you a little background so we can understand his statements well. Basically, all of these things are arrived at at a science. Right? It's not just one person who says that this is the correct opinion in that school of thought. Instead, there's a science to how all of this works. And if I'm not mistaken, he's about to get into the science of how we deem, is this the correct opinion in that school of thought or not? Because every school of thought has generations and scholars who are the prominent scholars of those generations. And those scholars of, like, you have the old generation and the middle generation and the later generation. And the scholars of these generations are the ones who, like, correct and adjust and, organize the school of thought. So if this is the case, there's a science about how we arrive at what these opinions are. And he talked about it in other lessons, like the earlier scholars, who they were, and the middle scholars and the later scholars, right? So you had like the middle scholars with Ibn Qudama and Ibn Taymiyyah's grandfather were like the middle scholars of the Hanbali school of thought. And they're the ones who determined what the school of thought was. And then in the later generations, it was Mardawi, the one who wrote Al-Insaf and so forth. But he's about to speak about it right now, I believe.
في حق المقلد من الناس، من عامة الناس الذي هو ليس أهل للاجتهاد، فلا فرض له ولا طريق له ولا سبيل له إلا التقليد. يقلد من يثق بعلمه ودينه. فالطريق إلى الاجتهاد هو التقليد، يبدأ بتقليد. وعندما نقول تقليد، الله سبحانه وتعالى أوصى بذلك فقال فاسألوا أهل الذكر إن كنتم لا تعلمون. إذن الذي لا يعلم كعامة الناس فإن فرضهم التقليد، ليس لهم طريق آخر. فإذا ارتقى هذا العامي وأصبح طالب علم وارتقى في طلب العلم وتدرج في طلب العلم وسلك طريقه وحصل قواعده وأصوله وآلته وأصبح قادرا على الاجتهاد، عند ذلك يصبح فرضه الاجتهاد. إذن مسألة التقليد والاجتهاد مسألة نسبية، فالتقليد قد يجب على شخص ويحرم على شخص، والاجتهاد قد يجب على شخص ويحرم على شخص. واضح المسألة هذه؟ ليس كل أحد يجتهد وليس كل أحد يقلد.
Here, instead of going that direction, he goes a different direction, may Allah preserve him. He talks about the issue of blind following instead. This is what he wanted to get to when he talked about the tarjih of the school of thought of Imam Ahmad. Like, what about following it and giving it preponderance in the way that you go about worshiping Allah? He says that the issue of blind following is an issue that is, if a person is ignorant and unable to understand the religion and unaware and has no other means to go about doing so, then this is his obligation, that he blindly follow a particular scholar. And this is what he does in the beginning of his affair, right? He blindly follows a scholar. And he says that blind following is the footstool that is stepped on to get to the level of having knowledge. Meaning that as a beginning student, the only thing you can do, not even as a student, but as a general person, when you have no knowledge and no ability to understand, then the only thing that you can do is blindly follow somebody. And this is what Allah points to with his statement, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. Then, after a person begins to study and begins to be counted amongst the ranks of the students of knowledge, and he travels their path, and he obtains what they obtain, and he reaches a level of being able to discern and understand on his own, then in this situation it becomes impermissible for him to blind follow them. So he says the issue of blind following is one that is respective to the person. So it might be permissible for some people and haram on other people. And it might be permissible in an issue and haram in a different issue. Just like forming your own opinion, right, which is known as ijtihad. Arriving at your own opinion is the same way. It can be obligatory for some people and haram on other people, right? So he wants to draw attention to this to show that this is the reason why, and this is my statement now, this is the reason why schools of thought are studied. Because it's a stepping stone to get to the ability to understand. If you try to jump directly to the final goal or the final stage, it's a good chance that you'll slip and won't accomplish. But if you start off with the fundamentals and just learning the issues, then learning the evidences, then learning the disagreement and going in this pattern, and by the time you reach the end, you'll actually accomplish. So blind following for the general person is okay in situations. And likewise, contrastly, making your own opinion for the general person is not okay. The person who doesn't have knowledge of an issue, it's not for him to speak issue without knowledge. So this is why he's mentioning these things, to give us a foundation to understand that learn first until you learned enough to where the obligation of blind following is no longer upon you, and you have the opportunity or the ability and the obligation to arrive at your own opinions. And they talk about these things in other places, and if there's any questions about this at the end of class, we can go into more detail about that.
فاسألوا أهل الذكر إن كنتم لا تعلمون. الذي لا يعلم يقلد، لكن الذي يعلم من كان من أهل العلم مؤهلا للاجتهاد فليس له أن يقلد الناس وهو يستطيع أن يعرف أو أن يتوصل إلى الراجح أو إلى الصحيح بالدليل.
Now, he says, so he mentions that ayat again, ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. So the one who doesn't know, his obligation is to what? Ask the people of knowledge. But the one who has knowledge, right? The one who has knowledge, it's not for him to blindly follow anyone. Right? The one who has knowledge, it is not for him that he that he arrive at any decision except with evidence.
أظن أن هذه القضية واضحة.
He says, and I hope that this affair is clear for you all.
الإنسان من بطن أمه عالما مجتهدا وإنما سيتدرج في طلب العلم حتى يصل فلذلك أقول التريث.
And he says, so no child comes out the womb of his mother a scholar. Right? No child comes out the womb of his mother knowing everything he needs to know. Instead, it's something that takes tadarruj, like step by step and traveling the right way. So he says, therefore, it's necessary that we have a tarayyuth, that we have slowness in the way that we learn. That we have a slowness in the way that we learn.
العلم والحرص والمثابرة على التحصيل حتى يصبح الإنسان عنده قدرة على تمييز الأقوال على الأقل يعني بعض الأقوال لأن مهما كان يبقى أهل العلم في بعض المسائل يعني قد يتوقفون في مسائل العلماء الكبار.
He says, so it's necessary that we have this slowness and that we give great concern and effort into accomplishing it in this fashion. And that way, if we do so, we'll be able to distinguish and evaluate the different statements, and at least some of the different statements. Because in reality, even the scholars have issues that they are unable to figure out on their own, right? No one is able to figure out everything, right? But the goal is to get to a point where we can understand a large portion of the issues.
المسائل فما بال طلبة العلم المبتدئين.
So he says, so if this is the affair of the scholars, that they don't understand all of these issues, every issue, they don't understand every issue, then what is your opinion about the beginning student? Is he going to be able to understand everything?
أكثر توقف وأكثر ورع وأكثر حيطة.
No. He says that it's necessary that the student show more tawaqquf, more pause, and more hesitation, and more abstention and piety regarding these issues.
شرع المصنف في كتاب الطهارة.
He says now, so this was the author's introduction, right? And he says, after that the author began with the book of purification. So after the introduction, the author began with the book of purification.
كتاب الطهارة. ما هي الطهارة أيها الأحباب؟ الطهارة في اللغة هي النظافة.
So he says, what is purification? He says, at-Tahara, and we're going to use this word from now on. He says, at-Tahara, in the language of the Arab, means nadafa. It means cleanliness, right? It means nadafa, to be clean.
ما هي في الاصطلاح؟ هل نفصل بين هذه الدورة وما مضى أم نربط بينها؟
He says, this is what it means in the language. But what does it mean in the terminology of the people of this particular science? And then he asked the students a question. As we said, this is the second seminar or conference, and it follows the first one. He asked the question, should we repeat the things we spoke about in the first seminar, or should we just let them go? Or should I ask questions about them or treat you all like you don't know them?
السؤال من حضر الدورات الماضية؟
Then he asked who participated in the last
أو أكثرها
conference.
حضر أكثر الدورات الماضية. طيب من حضوره هذا هو أول مرة؟
Then he asked who is this is their first lesson.
طيب إذا حتى يعني لا نحاسب ونؤاخذ بما مضى.
He says, so therefore a lot of the people might have been their first lesson. He says, therefore we're not going to hold you to accountable for what passed. I'm going to reteach you everything again. I'm not going to ask you questions like you should know them. Right?
من البداية يقول المصنف كتاب الطهارة. الطهارة في اللغة هي النظافة.
So he says, okay, but now this is Abdul-Hakim saying, once we go over something, I will hold you accountable for what we go over. So, he says that tahara linguistically means cleanliness. At-Tahara linguistically means purification, right? Or cleanliness, nadafa. Remember that. This is one of the things that we will ask.
شرعي أو اصطلاح أهل العلم. ما هي الطهارة؟ الطهارة في اصطلاح أهل العلم من يعرف ليعرف الغير.
Okay. He says that this is what it means in the language. But what does it mean in the religion of Islam? Right? I say to you, meanings or words have more than one meaning. They have their linguistical meaning, and then they have a religious meaning, and the religious meaning can vary based on the particular science that it's used in. And we talked about these things before. If there's questions about that, feel free to ask them at the end of class. He says, this is what the word tahara means in the language. But what does it mean in the religion? And then he asked, does anybody know the answer? So I asked, does anybody know what purity or tahara means in Islam? Alright, Fadl. لا
طيب أقول الطهارة في اصطلاح أهل العلم تعني ثلاثة أشياء. الأول رفع
purity or tahara. When the people of knowledge talk about it, it means three things. right? Purity or tahara, it has three aspects. When the people of knowledge talk about tahara, i.e. the people of fiqh, when they talk about tahara, it means three things.
والثاني رفع ما في معنى رفع الحدث والثالث زوال الخبث.
The first of them is raf al-hadith. I translate this as the purposeful removal of hadith. Does everybody know what hadith is? He's going to talk about it, but it's the physical, it's the abstract condition of the body after it passes gas or uses the restroom or has intercourse, right? Wasfun qa'imun fi bil badn, right? It's the impure state of the body after it does one of these actions. After you pass gas, you're in a state of hadith. After you have intercourse with your wife, you're in a state of hadith. There's nothing physically dirty about you, but you're in a state of impurity. So when we talk about tahara, the first meaning of it is raf al-hadith, the purposeful removal of hadith. Right? This is one. The second meaning it has is doing actions that are similar to removal of hadith. This is two. They're not really removing a hadith, but they're similar in nature. And the third meaning of purification is izalatul khabath or izalatul najasa, the removal of, or the going away with, or the doing away with najasa. He's going to define what is najasa in Islam. Right? We all too often use the term filth or impurity, but it's not what we think. Like dirt is not impure. Dirt is not dirty in Islam. So we have these three things. Raf al-hadith, the purposeful removal of hadith. Ha, dal, tha. This is a word that you need to learn in Arabic. This is number one. Wa ma fi ma'na, things similar to the removal of hadith. They're not the removal of hadith, but they're similar. He's going to give us examples. And number three is izalatin najasa, the doing away with of najasa. Right? And we use different words for a reason. The purposeful removal of hadith. Doing actions that are similar to the removal of hadith, and the removal or the doing away with of najasa. And this is another word that you need to know in Arabic, najasa. Right? Hadith and najasa. In addition to tahara. These are three Arabic words that we won't translate them often.
الطهارة تعريفها كالتالي: رفع الحدث وما في معناه وزوال الخبث.
He says, so at-tahara, its definition is as follows: رفع الحدث وما في معناه وزوال الخبث. Right? Who can tell me what tahara is? You tell me. All right. Pause. Hasbu. The removal of hadith, okay? Shukran, the purposeful removal of hadith, right? Things that are similar to removing of hadith and purification. We go back the other way. Huh? The doing away of najas. Izalatul najas, right? Or izalatul khabath. Getting rid of, or the going away of najas. واضح? This is طهارة. رفع الحدث وما في معناه وزوال الخبث. The purposeful removal of hadith, things similar to it, and the removal or the going away or the doing away with of najasa.
رفع الحدث وما في معناه، يعني ما في معنى رفع الحدث وزوال الخبث. هذه الثلاثة الأشياء ما هو تفسيرها؟ قال رفع الحدث. طيب ما هو الحدث؟ الحدث أمر معنوي لا يرى بالعين، أمر معنوي يقوم بالبدن يمنع من صحة الصلاة.
Okay. Now, we said رفع الحدث, right? What is hadith? Hadith, he explains it, is وصف معنوي قائم بالبدن تمنع من الصلاة ونحوها. It's an abstract state, right? Meaning it's not physical. It's not something you can see. It's an abstract state that occurs in the body that stops it from praying, and things similar to salah. When you break wudu, can you pray? Why not? You're in a state of hadath. You have this abstract state that occurred in your body that is stopping you from having your salat accepted. تَمْنَعُ مِنْ صِحَّةِ الصَّلَاةِ, right? So this is hadath, right? Hadath is a condition that occurs in the body, right? A non-physical, meaning it's not tangible. It's an abstract state. Nobody can look at you and tell you broke wind, right? It's nothing that you can be seen by the eyes. But it's a state that occurs in the body that prohibits your salat from being accepted, and likewise other actions, right? Some people say you can't make tawaf without wudu, right? Some people say you can't read the Quran in a state of hadath, right? Some people say you can't call, right? All of these things, if you're in this condition, they say you can't do those things. This is what hadath is, right? So a tahara is what? The purposeful removal of that condition. Does that make sense? Tahara is the purposeful removal of that state. What's that state called? Hadath. The purposeful removal of hadath. The getting rid of that state that your body's in that's stopping you from praying.
إذا خرج من الإنسان ريح أو بول نقول هذا الرجل محدث يعني اتصف بأمر معنوي لا الصلاة. لو صلى هذا الإنسان بعد أن خرج منه الريح وقبل أن يتطهر لا تصح صلاته.
Jay, he says, let's give an example. An individual broke wind. What do we call this person? We call this person a muhdith, a person who is in a state of hadath. If he wanted to go pray, would his prayer be accepted? Right? His prayer would not be accepted because he's in this abstract state that has occurred in his body that stops his salat from being accepted. Right? This is what is known as hadath. Purification or tahara is what? I'm asking you. Purposeful removal of this. Right? So now I want you to be using your mind. What do you think? How do you get rid of this state of hadath? Yeah, how do you get rid of it? Right? Making wudu. That's the purposeful removal of this state. Right? This is, even wudu is what? Tahar. Right? This is a form of tahar. This is what this definition means. It's the purposeful removal of that state of hadath. رفع الحدث.
إذن هذا هو الحدث أمر معنوي. والأمر الثاني من الطهارة ما في معناه. قلنا رفع الحدث وما في معناه. ما هو الذي في معنى رفع الحدث؟
So we all understand the first aspect of tahara. It's what? You say the Arabic word of hadath. The purposeful removal of hadath. Right? We understand what's the hadath? We're good. Right? Raf al-hadath. Mumtaz. What's the second aspect of tahara? Hassan. Not removing things, but things that have the same meaning as removal of hadath. Ma fi ma'na. Things that have the same meaning. They're not exactly the same, but it's almost the same. What does that mean? Let's see what he explains this to be. محدث. Yeah, like ومحدثاتها وشر الأمور محدثاتها. Right, محدث. أحدث, and he's in a state of hadith. But the other محدثاتها is different anyway, but okay. Okay, ما في معناه. Things similar to the removal of hadith.
تيمم الإنسان. هل إذا تيمم الإنسان للصلاة ارتفع حدثه؟ على المذهب لا يرتفع حدثه. إذن ما هو؟ يقولون التيمم مبيح وليس برافع.
I'll give you an example. The author gives an example here. He says things that are similar to the removal of hadath. a person makes tayammum. When he makes tayammum, has he removed the hadith? He says according to the school of thought, he hasn't removed the hadith. Right? This is something that there's disagreement about. But he's teaching us the school of thought. According to the school of thought, he hasn't removed the hadith. Right? So, this is what is meant by something similar to the removal of hadith. Because tayammum just allows you to pray, but it doesn't get rid of the state that your body's in. Right? They don't consider tayammum to be the removal of hadith. That's why when you find water, you gotta use it. Another example that I'm going to give you that might clarify it for you is washing your hands 3 times when you wake up before sticking them into the container. You all know of this sunnah. When you wake up after sleep, you gotta wash your hands 3 times before sticking them into the container. Or blowing out your nose 3 times after waking up, right? These are sunnahs. After you wash your hands 3 times, or blow out your nose, can you make salat? Why not? Because you haven't removed the hadith. But you've done something similar to the removal of hadith. Right? So this action of blowing out your nose 3 times or washing your hands is a what? Things that are similar, so it must be a what? Tahara. Making wudu. Right? You make wudu the first time you wash your arm, right? That's the removal of hadith. The second and the third time, did you remove any hadith? No, you didn't, because you removed it with the first one. So what is the second and third washing called? It's things that have the same meaning of the removal of hadith, right? They're not the removal of hadith, but they have the same meaning. So they are therefore then what? Tahara. This is what is meant by things that have the same meaning. Either they don't actually remove, or there was no hadith to begin with. Right? And he's going to explain it with some more examples.
الإنسان ثم صلى. هذا التيمم أليس هو من الطهارة؟ نعم من الطهارة. من أي أقسام الطهارة؟ هل هو من رفع الحدث؟ على المذهب لا. على القول الثاني نعم.
So he says, so this individual who made tayammum, we're almost done, inshallah. We'll take the last example and then we'll be done. The last type. He says that, so this individual made tayammum, right? He wants to go pray. Is tayammum tahara? Is tayammum tahara? Yes. Right. So what category is tahara? What category of tahara is it from? The second category. Things that are similar to the removal of hadith. This is according, to the school of thought. It's not raful hadith. Other opinions say it is. It does actually remove the hadith. Right? He mentions the 2 opinions, but he doesn't get into the issue.
على المذهب لا ما هو رفع حدث. إذن هو في معنى رفع الحدث. طيب. مثال آخر.
Gives another example.
إذا كان الإنسان توضأ للصلاة وصلى ثم أراد أن يجدد فجدد توضأ للمرة الثانية. السؤال الآن هذا الوضوء الثاني طهارة أم ليس طهارة؟
Jay. An individual wants to make salat. Right? So he makes wudu. Now he makes salat. After salat, he wants to renew his wudu. Right? He wants to yujaddid. He wants to renew his wudu. Is this renewal of the wudu, is it tahara or not? He made salat. He has wudu. He hasn't broke wudu. He wants to renew his wudu. He wants to just make it over again. Abu Salim says it's not tahara. Is it tahara or not? It's what? So if it's similar, then it's what? So it's what? From what category? Exactly. You see? He didn't remove any hadith, but it's still from tahara. What category of tahara? Things that are similar to the removal of hadith. Right? So don't let it confuse you. It's still tahara. Right? But it's not the removal of hadith, it's just things that are similar. Let's see if we can take the last one.
هل هو رفع حدث؟ هل رفع حدث بهذا الوضوء؟
Right, he asked,
لأن حدثه مرفع.
Did he remove any hadith with this wudu that he made? No, he didn't. But it's still tahara because it's things that are similar to the removal of hadith.
إذن هذا الوضوء في أي أقسام الطهارة نصنفه؟ نقول هو في معنى رفع الحدث.
So it's in the second
إذا كان
category of the
الإنسان
removal of
محدث
hadith.
فذهب إلى الوضوء وتوضأ، فإذا جاء يتوضأ غسل وجهه الغسلة الأولى، هذه الغسلة الأولى طهارة أم لا؟ من أي أنواع الطهارة؟ في رفع الحدث. الغسلة الثانية لا ترفع الحدث، الحدث رفع بالأولى، هو في معنى رفع الحدث. الغسلة الثالثة في معنى رفع الحدث. الميت إذا مات غسل، إذا غسل الميت، هذا غسل الميت أليس طهارة؟ طهارة. هذا الغسل للميت يرفع حدث الميت؟ ما يرفع حدث الميت. إذن هو من أي أنواع الطهارة؟ هو في معنى رفع الحدث. إذن الطهارة.
He gives a couple of examples, and some of them we gave already, so we'll breeze through them. A person wants to make wudu. He's in a state of hadith. He goes to make wudu. He washes his face, right? What category of tahara is that washing his face from? He wants to make wudu. He's in a state of hadith. He goes to make wudu. He washes his face, right? The first wash, right? What category of tahara is that from? The first category. That was the removal of hadith. The second time he washes his face, second category, right? Things that are similar, because there was no hadith left in his face anymore. What about the third time he washes his face? Second category, right? It's not the third category? It's still the second category, right? Because it's the things that are similar to the removal of hadith. Another example, a dead person. What do we do with a dead person? We make wudu, we make a ghusl, we bathe the dead person. When we bathe the dead person, does their state of hadith leave? It doesn't leave, does it? So what category, is it a tahara? It's the second category. It's still tahara, but it's from the second category. Things that have the same meaning as the removal of hadith, right? These are all examples of things that are similar to the removal of hadith. I'm going to give you one more example from myself. This is something to think about. I don't even know the answer now that I think about it. I would think based on this though, right? Person has salasal bowl. He always pees, right? He can't stop peeing. What does he do for salah? He makes wudu every time. Is this raf al-hadith or ma fi ma'na? See, I don't know. That's what I say. I don't know. Me, I would say it's ma fi ma'na, because he's constantly breaking his wudu. But then he breaks it right after that. He doesn't have to make it again. Right. So he didn't really remove the hadith. Yeah, because he breaks it. Salas al-bow means you constantly do it. It's constantly, you're constantly dripping pee. Or you're constantly breaking wind. Huh? He was breaking wind while he was praying. That's what, he's covered, yes. But did he remove the hadith? No, he didn't remove the hadith. He did things that are similar to the removal of hadith. You see what I'm saying? Even though his salat's accepted, that's what we're saying, right? But I don't know, maybe it might be number one. It's the same thing like he made the example of tayammum. He says tayammum doesn't remove your hadith. That's what I just said. It's similar to the tayammum in their opinion. But this, like I said, I don't know the answer. So that's something we could ask one day. These are the type of questions you pose to the ulama, and they see that you're a student. Right? You don't come up with the question, what's up with Shaykh Fulan and Fulan? You learn your religion. Anyway.
ثلاثة أقسام: رفع الحدث وما في معناه وزوال الخبث. ما هو زوال الخبث؟ زوال الخبث يعني زوال النجاسات.
The question is, what's the third category? Who remembers it? The going away with of najasa, right? We use the word going away with for a reason. He's going to mention it. So, what does it mean that najasa goes away?
زوال النجاسات. كيف تزول النجاسات؟ لها صور. غسلها بالماء إذا أصابت النجاسة.
He says, so the going away of impurities or najasa, and he'll define what najasa is, it has different ways that it can go away. It can go away with water. You can pour water on something najis, and it'll go away. This is tahara. For what category? The third, the removal or the going away of najasa.
أو ثوبا أو مكانا فغسلت بالماء. هذه طهارة أم لا؟ طهارة. من أي أنواع الطهارة؟ زوال خبث. Right? So if somebody's body or clothes or something gets dirty with najasa,
And we'll talk about what najasa is later. When it gets dirty with najasa, right? And then we wash it with water and it goes away. This is tahara from what category? The third.
قضى الإنسان حاجته فاستجمر بالحجر.
Another example, individual uses the bathroom and then he wipes himself with stones. Right? Is this tahara? What category? Third. Right? Because what did he do? He removed the najasa. Right? Did he use water? What did he use? He used stones. So this is another way that najasa can go away. That's why they use the word the going away of najasa. Right? Because whatever is used is sufficient.
الاستجمار بالحجر أليس من الطهارة؟ نعم، من أي أنواعها؟ من زوال الخبث، من زوال الخبث. إذا نلخص هذا الموضوع.
He's going to summarize it for us one last time and then we'll be done.
توضأ الإنسان بعد أن كان محدثا، هذا من أي أنواع الطهارة؟
So one more time, a person makes wudu after he broke his wudu. From what category of tahara is this? He made wudu after breaking wudu. It's from the first category, which is called what? Raf al-hadith, the purposeful removal of hadith, right?
رفع الحدث. إذا اغتسل من الجنابة.
Bathing after sexual intercourse. Raf al-hadith. لا, it's Raf al-hadith. It's not 3. What's najis? Yeah, you said it right. He said 3. What's najis about sexual intercourse? Right? It's 1. It's the removal of hadith. After you had sex, can you make salah? No. You got to make ghusl. Right? So it's from category 1. The purposeful removal of hadith.
إذا جدد الوضوء أو الغسلة الثانية أو الثالثة، هذا من أي أنواع الطهارة؟
Renewing your wudu, or the second or third washing in your wudu. From what type of tahara is this? The second, which is things similar to what? Rafal. Things similar to rafal hadith, right? Ma fi ma'na. Things similar to the removal of hadith.
بمعنى رفع الحدث. إذا غسل النجاسة عن نفسه أو استجمر بالحجر، هذا في من زوال.
He washed najis off of his body, or he used stones to wipe himself after using the bathroom. From what category? The third. The going away of najas. Right?
إذا الطهارة رفع الحدث وما في معناه وزوال الخبث. هذا هو تعريف الطهارة.
We'll stop here. He says, therefore, what is tahara? One more time from the beginning. Not impurities. Raf al-hadith. Right? That's not what kind of impurities? You got to be a little bit more direct than purities. Right? The hadith. What is hadith? Right, a quality that happens in your body that stops your salat from being accepted. Right? So, tahara is raf'ul hadith. Or, ma fi ma'na. Things that are similar to the removal of hadith. Or, the third, the going away of najas. All of these words, as you'll learn as we go further and further, like especially when we get into Shaykh al-Mumti', like what they mean, like the reason why we worded it this way has a benefit. Right? Why does it have to be the purposeful removal of hadith? Why do you think that it has to be purposeful? Exactly. Intention. No intention, it doesn't work. Right? I make wudu without making intention. Is my wudu remove my hadith? So it has to be purposeful. Right? Why do we say izala? Why does just getting rid of najasa? What does that mean? Why don't we say the purposeful removal of najasa? Why do we just say getting rid of najasa? Huh? One, we needed an intention. The other one, we must what? We don't need an intention. Do you need an intention to wash your car? To get the dirt off? If you washed your car, you hit a deer, right? So now you have this blood on your car. That deer blood is najis. Right? You're driving on the highway, you hit a deer. Right? That deer, you didn't slaughter that deer. Right? So that means the blood and all of this is najis. Do you need to make intention to clean your car, for your car to be clean? Or what if the rain comes and just washes it off? Well, water's something different. We're saying the rain came and washed your car off. Is your car clean? Your car's clean, yes. Because it's just the getting away of najasa, the going away. So all of these things have a purpose. So therefore, in today's lesson, to recap, we covered some of this stuff doesn't. We covered the different types of views held in the school of thought: a-nas, ishara, and wajh. Right? This is something that we should look at: a-nas, ishara, and wajh. Right? What's a nas? Right? The statement of the Imam of that school of thought. An ishara is what? An indirect. Yeah, linguistically it's pointing to the direction, but here it means the indirect statement. Like he didn't say it clearly, but he said something that made you understand his opinion. What's a wajh? The opinions of the scholars of that school of thought. Mumtaz, right? We talked about in this book, he's only going to mention the strong opinion. We talked about taqleed and some of the stuff about like starting as a student with the school of thought before trying to just jump into a book on your own and understand it. But we don't really need to go over that again. And we talked about tahara. And we said linguistically it's nadafa, and in the religion it's raf'ul hadath, wa ma fi ma'na, wa zawal al-khabath. Right? So we'll stop at that amount at 27:59. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.